We are thrilled to host today's webinar on a special event like International Women's Day, and even more so, celebrating this event by showcasing a new study that comprises a team of women who are also part of the PIRL Project. To begin with today's webinar, we have Lesley Sikapa, a Bachelor of Science student at the University of Toronto, who will be sharing her research experience and work that is currently underway, known as Employment and Employability: Perspectives of African Researchers with Disabilities. During today's webinar, Lesley will discuss the work that she and her team are conducting about researchers of African descent who are living with disabilities. Lesley will talk about the different decisions that they have made along the way in order to design and carry out their study. This will be an opportunity to learn more about the research project. We will hold questions at the end of the presentation, at which point Lesley will be able to facilitate your questions as best as possible. Once the webinar has finished, please feel free to unmute yourself, leave a comment in the chat box, or use the hand raised function on Zoom. As you can see on the slide, we've put the instructions for you as well. And now I will pass the baton to Lesley, who will begin her presentation and better introduce herself to you. Thank you all very much, and I hope you enjoy. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. Unfortunately, I can see most people here because I'm sharing my screen and it's a bit strange. But my name is Lesley Sikapa. I am from Cameroon. I was born and raised there. I am currently an undergraduate student here at the University of Toronto in Canada. And I'm studying here under the MasterCard Foundation Scholars Program, which is basically like a scholarship program for international students. So I'm going to provide like a background about myself to start with, and that will basically help. That would lead us to basically how I got to this project, or how my team and myself got to this project. So when I got here in 2017, just like most undergraduate student, I wasn't necessarily sure of what I wanted to do, right, in terms of what courses to select. So, but like the good news is, at least I knew I wanted to do something in the health sector. So I wanted to do something in the health field. And at the same time, I also knew I didn't want to become a doctor because I was more interested in the social aspect of health compared to the more like invasive aspect of health, like doing a surgery and things like that. So that's how I started exploring like the different programs offered by the university. And I found out about this program called Global Health, which is what I'm doing right now. And it was quite interesting because basically what the program read on the website, it said, so this is what the program said on the website. The aim of the Global Health Program is to provide students with instruction in fundamental biological sciences and to integrate a broad understanding of the socio-economic and cultural determinants of health to populations around the world. So when I read this, I just felt like, yes, this resonates a lot with my general interest of wanting to focus on the social aspect of health. And doing this course, I learned so much about health, but like I would say like the biggest lessons I took away was this understanding of this concept called the social determinants of health. And basically the social determinants of health are just these factors around us, like social factors, economic, political, environmental factors that affect our health. And that could be like our education, our income level, our gender for some people as well. And basically those factors come in place to influence, the person that we are in our health condition. So knowing that, I was like, okay, cool. Then I want to do some like work in a field that will help me address those factors then to help improve the health of people. And another key lesson that I've learned, and that I'll say I'm still learning as part of my program, is also this whole idea of the importance of research in global health work. So basically making sure that you're always like grounded in research and whatever things we do. And with those two understanding, I was like, okay, cool. Now I know there's research, I know there's social determinants of health. So let me find a way to combine those two and do something out of that. And very, very long story short, I found myself meeting Lynn or Dr. Coburn, because the story of that is like another long story, which I don't think is very relevant to this discussion, but I met her, and that's kind of how I started working on the PIRL project and became a research assistant. And it's been literally one of the most amazing experiences for me because I've learned so much in the PIRL network from people in the PIRL network. And some of the key lessons I've learned are basically what it means to be a researcher. Because for the most part, when I used to, think about research, it always was someone like an old white man in the lab who is like mixing substances and making something out of that. So that was my understanding of research. But then as part of the PIRL network, I end up understanding that, well, you don't always have to be like, someone who is like a PhD holder or even an academic to be able to do research or to be, to become a researcher. And that also meant a lot to me as a young African woman who was also still, doing my undergraduate degree. That implied that, well, I can also conduct research myself, which was quite exciting. And another thing I learned is also, just learning about research in general, because that's almost like the purpose of the PIRL network, really like learning about research, how to conduct research. And in this process, I found myself asking myself this question of what exactly is research? And I feel like for many people, there might be different understanding or definitions of that. But to me, I just got to the conclusion of research is just about like being curious and basically asking certain questions and wanting to find out the answer to those questions. And research just provide you that space or that framework to be able to like get those answers, if that makes sense. And another key learning again, which is really central to like the PIRL project, is really the importance of making research spaces inclusive and accessible. Given that you're mostly working, the focus is mostly on working with people with disabilities, but it's not only that, because part of the PIRL network is also like having researchers and community members from the global north, like the global north with countries like Canada, or like the global south in countries like Cameroon. And the resources that someone may have like as a researcher here in Canada is not the same as what one may have if they are a researcher in Cameroon. So basically, what does that mean for those researchers, and how can we make sure that they're able to basically do research as much as they want to, and have that space open to them as researchers, as someone from the global south, as a person with disabilities. So and at times, like, and one of the learning I remember, which I learned during the PIRL Institute, the very first was literally how a small change as the font size or the font type can make such a difference for somebody. So those type of learning. So another key important lesson was that some people, for some people, research is actually a form of employment, which wasn't something I knew before, because research again was very that abstract concept that could be done only by certain type of people. So that was also another important lesson. So that's why when the opportunity to do this research came up, and it actually came up through my scholarship program, they offered like this. So they generally have like an entrepreneurship fund that they give to that students have to apply for. But this year they actually added a research grant to that, and that's also another long story why they added that. But the interesting part is that it was actually because of the work I was doing with Lean. I found myself talking a lot about that with the MasterCard office, and that's how they actually implemented that. So that also made me realize that it's also great to when you're doing research, really talk about that with other people and share what you're learning, and also share what you enjoy about it with other people, because that's actually how I was able to get the grant to do this research project. So when the opportunity for that came up, I remember going to Dr. Coburn and just just telling her about that. I was like, okay, cool, this is a great opportunity. And given what I've learned in the PIRL network, I know I want to do something that has to do with people with disabilities. And the focus of the grant was also to do something related to employment, which was even more relevant because that was literally one of the things that I learned, as part of the being part of the PIRL network. So I was talking to Dr. Coburn, and we were like, okay, cool. There's this whole, I want to a small PIRL studies, and we brainstorm about so many ideas. And then of course we also needed to have research or existing knowledge to back us up or back up what we were saying. And that's how some of the research that as I kept searching, this is some of the findings that I made. And one of them was the fact that approximately 1 billion people of working age live with disabilities around the world, and about 19% of that population lives in Africa. And in the global south, again, that's countries like Cameroon and just countries that are generally referred to as low-income countries. So in the global south, there's between 80 to 90% of people of working age living with disabilities are unemployed. So with this statistic, I'm not sure to what extent it includes the informal sector, because I know, for example, in Cameroon, the informal sector is a heavy sector, but at the same time, we also know that even though it's like a huge sector, people with disabilities aren't necessarily as represented in that sector either. So to some extent, I would say I would definitely want to agree with these statistics. And also another finding was the fact that as of 2013, about 180, there were only about 180,000 researchers in Africa. That might sound like a huge number, but then compared to the whole world, is really not so significant for a whole continent with 54 countries. And again, this was supported again by the fact that in the whole African continent, the global output of research is just about, it represents only about 2.6% of what is contributed by the whole world. And just as a whole contrast, it's so countries like only the United States on its own contributes about 25% of the global output of research, and the European Union contributes 34% of the global output of research, which means that there definitely exists a huge slack between in in the whole continent of Africa when it comes to doing research, even in terms of the number of researchers that who are present. So with all this understanding, that's how basically came up with the idea of exploring that intersectionality of being a person with disability, an African researcher or an aspiring researcher undertaking research in Africa. So later on, I'm going to explain a bit more why we also wanted to include aspiring researchers. But yeah, so the purpose was just to, what would it mean for someone to be these three people, being a person with disabilities, being a researcher, being an African, and also doing your research in Africa, because doing your research in another part of the world means different things. Just as I mentioned earlier, doing here in Canada, you have more resources compared to someone who might be doing research in Cameroon, just as an example. And then the research question that we came up with is, it's a very long one, so let me take a breath to read this one. So our research question is, how is the intersectionality of being a person with disability and an African researcher undertaking research in Africa experienced in acquiring and or maintaining research-related employment? So just to break that down, because it's very long. So basically the question that we're asking is, just as I mentioned earlier, you as a person with disability, and as you're a person with disability and you're an African researcher, what does it mean to you, or how is what is your overall experience when you're trying to look for a job, when you're trying to maintain the job that you currently have, and not any kind of job that is related to the research field, like a research related employment. So just as I mentioned before, the research sector in Africa isn't as productive, if I can use that word, compared to the rest of the world. So what does it mean now for you who is an African researcher and you also have a disability? How do you get employed, or how do you maintain your employment in the field of research? And that's why the title of this study is Employment and Employability, Perspective of Current and Aspiring African Researchers with Disabilities. So just to quickly introduce our team, because we're actually quite a few of us working on this project. So there's Annika, who's actually also part of the PIRL network. Patience, who is also and Annika is a master's student at the University of Waterloo. Patience is an undergraduate student here at the University of Toronto, actually also from Cameroon. Jane is a lecturer and research supervisor here at the university. Of course, most, if not all of you know Lynn, and she's part of the project, and also Dr. Lewis, he's part of this. And for the most part, the project is heavily represented by women, which on this day is quite awesome to have this type of representation in the research team. So I'll now go a bit further and talk about our actual research process for this. And for the most part, the research process was it was determined when we were actually doing our research ethics application. So basically, we have to do that because our research involves, you know, interacting with other human beings, actually asking questions to other human beings, and the research ethics board just needs to make sure that we are being ethical in our approach. That is, in terms of, you know, how we're going to be treating the participants, how we're going to be treating the information that they give us, and, you know, how we're going to make sure that not only are they safe during the whole process, but also even us as researchers are also safe in that process. So that's why we had to apply for the research ethics approval, and that's when we like designed like the most part, if not all, of the research. And it started from like the research question. So we didn't start initially. We didn't have the whole. It wasn't about like the experience, right? The question that we had initially was, oh, what are the barriers and facilitators to getting an employment in the field of research for African researchers with disabilities? But then we realized that by asking, you know, what are the barriers and facilitators, we're actually limiting ourselves. And that's also related to the reason why the research design that we are using it's called like an interpretative descriptive design. So basically with this one, it's like we are not going into the study with a certain hypothesis or a certain assumption saying that, well, if this, then this. So we're not doing that. Instead, we are trying to make sure that we understand our question, or we get some sort of explanation to our question by making sure like the research remains based in the reality of the participant. So that's why we want to know the overall experience, you know. And even in terms of the type of questions that we ask, we're not just going to say like, oh, what are the barriers? Because at times some people may not even realize that this is a barrier, but then when they tell you about their whole journey, it actually brings up like certain things. And we by looking at the experience instead of specifically focusing only on barriers and facilitators, we actually bring out some new information that we did not even think about before, like that may or may not be related to like, the barriers and facilitators. So we wanted to get like a more holistic approach to, you know, understanding who the participant is, what is it like for them when they're trying to, you know, get an employment in the field of research in Africa. So the next step was again like in terms of who exactly are our participants for this project. Just as I mentioned before, you see, we didn't only say, you know, African researchers with disabilities. We also said African researchers and aspiring researchers. And the reason why we wanted to include aspiring is because of what? So an aspiring researcher in this case could be someone like myself who, let's say before doing this research project, I had not done like proper research before. Like I had never been a principal investigator in a study before. However, as I did mention at the start, I did have an interest in, you know, doing research. I did have an interest in like answering certain questions, you know. So that would be someone who's like an aspiring researcher because you are interested, you want to pursue it, but then you haven't necessarily had that opportunity or for whatever reason. So you're still just at that, you know, aspiring stage. So we wanted to include those people because they do have their own challenges. Because when I think about myself, for example, when I was back home, my understanding of research, as I mentioned before, was very different compared to when I came here. And that understanding of research definitely, I remember then I didn't even consider research as a field, as something I would do in my life. But then, you know, having this other experience here in North America made me exposed to certain things that made me want to do more research. So by getting that perspective of those who are aspiring, it actually can help us understand why is it that you're unable to enter the field of research, or why is it that it has been difficult for you to, you know, carry out research as you would have wanted to. So that's why we want to include that perspective as well. And now the next aspect was deciding who is an African or who is a person with disability. And the question of who is an African might sound a bit silly, but being in this part of the world, like even back home, like it's like when you look at someone, you cannot guess where they're coming from. Like just, and the best example here is, for example, like a white South African. They're from South Africa, which is an African country. So you could actually consider a person as an African, but then if you're walking on the street and you look at that person, that will not be the first, like if you're being asked where are they from, that will not be the first answer that you come up with, or the first thing that comes to your mind. So that's why we wanted to like, have this population there as well. So yeah, so so basically, oh, sorry, what I mean is like, so by trying to understand like who is an African and who is, and even for a person with disability, you cannot judge, someone's disability just by looking at them, just by seeing them. So the best way we went about it was just like, having people self-identify as, I am a person with disability. And then for African, I think the only decision we made there was that, well, you have to have like African ancestry. That means maybe like one of your parents was or is an African. And now the location of the research was also like a very important thing, because again, the challenges of doing research here versus back home are different, or versus like in the global south, in Africa in general, are different compared to here. And by the location of research, we also had like so many like back and forth discussion just to understand, what does it even mean to do research in Africa? Because does it mean that my participants have to be selected there? Or does it mean that I have to be physically there? Because the research that I'm doing right now, we could actually consider this as research being done in Africa. And the reason why we would say that is because we are collecting the data from participants who may or may not be physically located there, but have some ties there or have been doing their research there in Africa, in the continent. Or yeah, like my data collection is basically from Africa, if that makes sense. My participants as well. So that could be something. So we had like lots of discussion around, like what does it even mean to do research in Africa? And for another study, it may differ, you may have like another definition of what that means for your specific study that you want to do, and how that can, and that will only depend on, how that will affect the answer, or like basically like how it affect the research question that you have and the potential outcome that you come up with. And now in terms of like the data collection, this one was a long process. So like the survey, initially when we had the survey, it was basically just going to ask like demographic questions, like your age, your gender, your level of education, like very like basic demographic question. But then like the discussions with like some of the mentors, after the discussion, realized that, well, what is the point of limiting the survey? We can do so much more with the survey, because there's a higher likelihood that the survey can reach further, can reach more people than the interview. So let's actually use that at our advantage and put in questions there that could actually, give us some like real data. And if we just like have demographic information, it really doesn't tell us much. And we could just ask those questions instead at the start of the interview. And this wouldn't be a mixed method study anymore. So really making the survey, designing the survey such that we actually get some relevant information from the survey. And we're actually doing it via SurveyMonkey, which has also been so difficult because of the back and forth, and like just like the organizing things on the platform to make them look nice and things like that. And yeah, so that was basically what we did with the survey. And in terms of the interview, another discussion, since our approach is like an interpretative approach. Actually, at this point, I think we have only about 5 questions in our interview guide, but these questions are very like broad in a way that it helps the participant again like narrate that journey, So because we're like, what has been your journey from X to Y, from this point to that point? Because we really want to know the story. We want you to be the one talking and giving us that narrative of how you got where you are right now. What has been the process? So that's kind of like the approach that we're using for the interviews. And in terms of the number of interviewers, actually 50% of our team is made up of like more experienced researchers like Dr. Louise, Dr. Koba and Ojane. And then the rest, the other 50% is like myself and, other students who we don't necessarily have as much experience. So another decision that we had to make at this point was, well, what if we actually combine 2 people, like the more experienced with the less experience? So it's going to like a whole, even though we are conducting the research, it's actually going to be a learning experience at that moment. So really like seizing every opportunity to learn something. And I did forget to mention that we're actually currently collecting our data. So we actually have sent out the survey already. If you're part of the PIRL network, you probably would have seen that. But if you haven't seen it, we can definitely send the survey again, the link to the survey, because we're collecting that. And we haven't moved to the data analysis stage yet, but ideally, especially when we are going to start the interviews, data analysis will happening at the same time as the data collection, because we also want to some extent to use the information that we get to inform the interviews to some degree, even like the survey. If we see like certain trends in our surveys, we want that to, somehow help us inform the interview. And the way we're analyzing this is using descriptive statistics, like the mean, the median, the frequency. Again, as I mentioned, like we really trying to see if there's a trend in that and help us like build improve the interviews, the interview questions. And the interview is going to be analyzed using thematic analysis. So that's basically like we are going to be like coding the information into like different themes and see what comes up. Because again, we didn't go in with a specific hypothesis of what we're expecting. We just want to see basically what the story tells us. And in terms of this dissemination and knowledge translation, so we're not just doing this research for the sake of doing it. Like it's like, because it's good to know, okay, this is the experience of this population, because there isn't actually much, there's very limited information on this. And it's really great to know what the experience is, but at the same time, it's even better if you can do something about that. So another key part of this research is to really make recommendations. And the recommendations are both at an individual level and also at the more like structural level. So given that we are learning from aspiring researchers versus like more experienced researchers or people who have done research in like, different parts of Africa and like so many other parts of the world, there's so much that you can learn from each other. So part of the recommendations here are meant to be even like within, it's not like they're going to be interviewing together, but the output, one of our, like the output which will have the recommendations is also like very relevant to an individual level and also to a more like structural level in terms of like making recommendations to like universities or organizations, and just so they can understand what type of like changes or improvements they can actually make, such that, the experience or it's so that again, the research space is really made open for this population, someone is an African, a person with disability conducting research in Africa, because you want to open that space, and you wouldn't know how to unless you basically, get that that understanding of what it has been for this population, or like what has been the experience of this. So that's like almost like the overarching purpose of like the study. And of course, like there were also like lots of logistic decisions that we had to like, come up with when we're designing the study. Because the question of, how are we conducting the interviews, via Zoom and WhatsApp? Because from the start, even before COVID, we knew we were going to do that online because we want to get as much representation from all African countries. If possible, from all 54 countries, that would be perfect. So we knew, of course, it wouldn't be feasible to like, move around all the countries to interview everybody. So from the start, we knew that. But then it's like, even looking at, how would that happen? Because at times there's lots of like internet issues. For example, like when you're having like a conversation with someone in Cameroon. So at times Zoom may not be the best thing. So we also considered using WhatsApp, and Dr. Coben has experience like using WhatsApp for conducting research. And basically with this one, for interviews that will be conducted via WhatsApp, the decision was that we're actually going to, have like maybe a text conversation with the participant where they're answering those questions via text. And then via Zoom, we also had to think of the logistics of, how is the whole process, when the participant join, why that happens. So we had to map out the process of the research from the recruitment stage, when do we send out the recruitment email? How often do we send that out? Who do we send that to? And then thinking about also informed consent, how do we make sure that participants are aware of their rights as participants at every single stage of the research process, that they're doing this research voluntarily, they're not being forced to do anything, they are aware of like all the potential risk or benefits to them to be able to engage in this research, that they can, how to make sure they know they can withdraw their data at any single point. So that was also an important thing, really like remembering like, from the start, this is when you have to do this, read the consent form, do this. After the interview, these are really understanding that process, even in terms of data protection and data storage, how are we as a team moving around with the data? How are we making sure that data stays protected? Because that's part of the things we are being asked in the research ethics application, because someone may say certain things and they feel comfortable saying it to us at the moment, but that doesn't mean they would want the rest of the world to know that this person, me, Lesley, I said this at this moment, and that could be for so many other reasons. So we owe them. So that's part of their right as participants to make sure that that data is really protected and stored in an appropriate way. And yeah, so that was mostly like, what our research process looks like. I may or may have not touched certain areas. We can go through that during like the Q&A moment. But before anything, I actually wanted to share like some of the major learnings that I've acquired throughout this experience. And literally some of these things I'm still learning about those. But for me, like the biggest lesson so far has just been the understanding that research is really an iterative process. And what that means is that it's a back and forth. It's like you start here, you start with this thing, but then as you go on, you modify. And I feel like that's really like a really great aspect of research, because whatever idea you started with, it doesn't mean you have to finish with that. Because as you go, and again, it just reminds me of that understanding that you learn as you go, and you keep learning. So you keep learning so many things, and then like you make changes accordingly. Just like we changed our research question, we changed the purpose of the survey, and all those changes that were made. And but the whole idea is just to get the most out of this research that you're doing, and get like really good. You want to get like good quality data. Like it wouldn't make sense to just waste your time and everybody's time to just do anything. So you really want to like go through the process again and again. So it's not like a straight line, it's really a circle that you keep going back to the questions and everything. And for me, another important learning, I would say it wasn't just as part of this project, but also just being in the PIRL network in general, is just how new experiences help define your interest or my interest. Because when I was here in first year in 2017, I wasn't necessarily like, I didn't even know about, like disabilities inclusive development, or like research, or, like people like, African researchers or anything like that. That wasn't necessarily something those weren't necessarily my interest. But as I found myself learning about research, learning from other people's experiences, hearing about like different stories, naturally, it creates this new interest. It's like, it really makes me more curious. So I guess I'm just using this as a way of saying that, it's always good to be open to new experiences, because there's just like so much you can, you may not have expected that from the start, but there's so much that you can learn from that. And, that's literally just that. I'll say that curiosity is what got me to this point where I am right now. And I don't know what my current curiosity is going to, I don't know what's going to lead me next, but it's just exciting to at times just reflect and realize that, oh, wow, I'm here right now just because I was curious about this random thing. And so, yeah, it's been a fun, interesting process. And that was like the main things I had to share with everyone here. And of course, if you have like any questions, any thoughts, any comments that you want to share with me, they're all welcome and much appreciated. So that's that for me. Thank you. Sharing my screen. Okay, yeah. I stopped sharing my screen now.
Leslie, if you look in the chat, there's a question for you, and it's by Ellen, and she's asking, are you still collecting survey data, and how are the responses going?
Yeah, so we are still collecting survey data. We actually started like a few weeks ago. For the moment, I would say we actually haven't like started analyzing the survey responses, but absolutely we are collecting data. So if you know anybody, I think we might, after this, we might actually like reshare the link again just to make sure people got it, in case they didn't. I'm not sure if I understood very well. We said that the survey will be on SurveyMonkey, right? Do you think it will reach all type of population? Good question. Yes, we are doing the survey on SurveyMonkey, and the reason why we actually chose SurveyMonkey is because it's actually very like an accessible platform for doing surveys. So that was like the main thing. But I don't know what type of populations. Maybe if you want to like specify what type of populations, but we are the way we are sharing by email. We are sharing to people via WhatsApp, and those are the main ways so far. And you can actually easily do the survey on your phone. You can also do the survey, of course, like if you have a laptop. So yeah, I'm not, maybe, I don't know if you want to specify what other populations. Yeah. Wish to know the platform you are using to save your data. So for the survey data right now is just staying on SurveyMonkey, but then when you're actually going to move on to the data analysis, the data won't be saved on a platform per se. We're going to just like save it in a, so like the University of Toronto has like some secured, I don't know how to, it's like a secured folder type of thing. And that's basically where like most of like all the information will be saved. So for the moment, the survey data just like would stay there on SurveyMonkey. So we're not like moving data around and things like that. And like SurveyMonkey is actually pretty secure as well, so which is pretty cool. I have a question. Is survey accessible to the visually impaired? Yes, it's SurveyMonkey again. It's a accessible platform. You were talking about determinants of health of population. Health of population who have poor indicators of health doesn't even know how to use TIC. Well, that's an interesting point. Very much debatable, but it depends. Of course, like there's levels of poverty. I don't know if that's the discussion I want to go into right now, but there's of course like population people who are in like extreme poverty that may not have access to like a mobile phone and things like that. But in terms of being like the feasibility of that, the whole idea is to try to like reach African populations. And of course, even me right now, I'm not in Cameroon, I'm not in Africa, which means even if I wanted to and then thinking of like COVID as well, it wouldn't really make sense in like the health aspect to be going to people individually to be doing that, because it's also like not safe. But yes, there's definitely I'll say in every situation, there's always people who may not be reached. That's why you try as much as you can to, reach as many people. And that's one of the reasons why we're trying to like diversify like the means to which we contact people. Of course, not everyone will be able to do that. But if I just think of like my experience in Cameroon, a very large percent of the population actually would have access to like a phone thing. And again, one thing I would also do in this research is just having that flexibility of saying, hey, if you have like any issues with the thing, just contact us, because there might be people who are interested, but for one reason or not, may not be able to actually like do this. So it's like, I'll say that's really like a case by case type of situation where I cannot really like comment on, why someone may or may not be able to do it, but yeah. Next question. Glad to see your determination. Oh, thank you. What advice do you have for my students in Africa who think research is a very tedious process? It is. and will quickly just do research as a means of success in their exam, but hardly would like to pursue a career in that. Whew. That's an awesome question, because I'm just thinking of like my own journey and how I wasn't even interested in research at all. And I'd say like the most I would advise the students really just, even like just leaving aside the research, just understand what your own personal interests are. Because I feel like I know so many people who are also interested in like global health and public health work, but are not doing research. So for me, research was a means to, address those things that I'm interested in, or like do the things that I'm interested in. So for the first part, I'll just say like, have the students understand what is it that they want to do, like what are the areas of interest. And if now you as the instructor see like, okay, based on these areas of interest, this is what like, research can actually help you get there, then maybe make that as a recommendation, because I don't think it makes sense to like force or push anyone to do that, because research is based on my own experience, it's difficult, okay? I'm not going to lie, because it's a long process. There's a lot of back and forth. And even when I think of like the advice I've been given by PhD students, they always say that, don't do research just for the sake of doing it, because it's your own personal time that you have to do it. No one is going to be out there pushing you to do that. So if you don't have like that intrinsic motivation to do it, then it wouldn't make a lot of sense. But like the most you can do, at least as an instructor, is just like make those recommendations, make those advice, like actually show them the different career paths that are available. Because also one thing is that you don't even, I didn't know that research was a career for anyone. That's actually something I did not even know at all. So just like, it's like almost like providing them with the knowledge, providing them with the different things they may need to know. And yeah, so that's the most I can say. And thank you, Lucy, you're doing a great job. Thank you, Alice.
Lesley, we had a hands up by
Oh,
Christian.
I can see the.
Yeah, I lowered it because I felt like I probably didn't need to intervene. But if you give me the floor, I will take it. Yeah, thank you, Lesley. It's been a while since I seen you last time. I joined the presentation midway, but you did a fantastic job from what I was able to hear. Can we can you of just once you're done with your BA, your BS, your Bachelor of Science, BSc, can U of T allow you to jump straight to PhD, because I think you're ready.
Well, I don't know if they're that nice, but
oh no, yeah, try. Yeah, you did a really, really good job. The reason I raised my hand also is just to if you allow me to add to what you said regarding the questions that mention TIC and the fact that you talk about social determinants of health.
Sure.
And the worry that you might not reach a population that do not have access or are not digitally literate. I would say that, but generally speaking, when you will write up your research, you will acknowledge that your survey was sent to people who can actually access it, right, on SurveyMonkey. It's probably important for you to acknowledge that it's not meant for all the your targeted population, but only to those who are able to access your survey on SurveyMonkey and complete it. So that's some of it's. I wouldn't call it a limitation, but it's just an acknowledgement when you write your results. Yeah, that's all I wanted to say. Great job again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, there's another question. Yeah, sure. Brenda, you can definitely follow up. I think those of us in Africa can come in particular, for example. Oh, that would be great. That would be awesome. For me, for the most part, I would say I was very like privileged because I got like the scholarship and being able to be here and like the exposure that I had to like different researchers. But again, having like a platform like the PIRL, like this PIRL network is like you learn from like so many people from like so many different parts of the world, which is like, a very great opportunity. And I would say even going back to like Louis' example, like just even introducing students to like this type of network can actually make them learn about research and understand, what, like, if it's actually something they're interested in, because at times it actually takes you to actually learn about something to see how you feel about it. Because for the most part, you may not even know about it. So that's why you're like, meh, not interesting. But then when you start learning about something, you realize, oh, there's actually this and this that I can do with it. So just, the PIRL network it's a great resource. Okay, if there's other questions, feel free to throw them at me. I'll answer to the best of my ability.
Hi, Leslie.
Hi.
Lynn. Sorry, were you about to say something?
Oh no, I was just about to remind people that again we have the survey which is out there, and share with your network, share with everybody that you can share with.
Yeah, you did a great job. Thank you very much. I'm going to ask you a bit of a hard question. And that is there anyone on your research team who has a disability or who self-identifies as a disability? And just give us a bit of background about that.
Very hard question, because yeah, actually, unfortunately, nobody in our team identifies as a person with disability. And I do remember we had like lots of discussion around that, because it's like we're having this African experience, we're having this acquiring research experience, but then we are lacking like this sense, like the key aspect of it. And so that's definitely limitations, but I think the main reason why we end up not moving forward with that was I can't remember what to like the main reason why, to be honest, but I don't really have a good answer for that, because that was definitely like a discussion we did have, and because we're considering how, even in terms of the data analysis, that there's just so much that as someone who doesn't have that lived experience can actually, like, of course, the data analysis can be done by any other person. Then as someone who has the lived experience of being a person with disability, there's more insight, there's different insight that you can bring to the analysis. And I remember how initially we were considering having, like adding people later on, but looking at the timelines and the research ethics protocol, like it ended up not being feasible. So that was one of the reasons why we ended up not going with that. But huge limitation right there for our study. That's one thing I have to acknowledge.
And maybe we will consider having some people join the team for data analysis and interpretation.
That'll be an option too. Wait, actually, is that actually feasible, thinking in terms of the ethics board? Oh, we can do an amendment, right?
That's right. We could do an amendment to the ethics.
Yeah, that should be fine.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Again, I'm here for all the questions, and happy Women's. I don't think I wish happy International Women's Day to everyone here, but happy International Women's Day to all our researchers, aspiring researchers, community members, all the PIRL network, everyone who's here. What is your timeline? So for the survey, if I remember, the survey is 1.5 months. Yeah, I think so. If I'm wrong, because I think we're saying, yeah. So for the survey, you have like about 1.5 months for the survey, and the surveys and the interviews are going are technically happening together, but then also keeping in mind that we have like after, so the way we recruit people for the interviews is that it's only once they've done the survey that they can actually indicate at the end that they want to do the interview. So assuming that someone did the survey on the very last week, so that's like in the upcoming month, that means we can only be able to do the interview with them like somewhere after that. And even in terms of like the logistics of meeting up with people, setting up the time, that might have to be extended. But for the survey, at least we have like 1.5 months for that. And the interview, I would say our timeline is more flexible for that, because we had to, because unlike the survey where you can actually, go do it on your own time when you want to, for the interview, you actually have to like set up a time. And also another option that we made available for that we are doing for the study is that we're actually planning to like conduct the surveys, the interview, like maybe in several parts, if that makes sense. So let's say we are having like a conversation here on Zoom for the interview, but then your internet stops and it's not going to work again. The option that we have is like, we can actually like pick it up another day, or even if during the interview someone feels like really tired and exhausted and they cannot do it anymore, we actually be like, okay, we can actually stop for today and maybe like resume another day. It's not like the questions are really long, but just to provide that flexibility, keeping in mind the, how internet can be very disorganized at times. Even mine here, there's been so many days when I've been kicked out of my classes because my internet just stopped. So I really didn't attend the whole class because of that. So we acknowledge that those things happen. So that's one thing we're putting there to address that issue. Any continuance, but if we don't get enough people checking the box for a follow-up interview, we'll just keep sending. I'd say we just keep sending the links, just keep sending the reminders, because even when we think of the number of people we are sending it to, like the PIRL network, for example, it's like over 100 people. If I feel like I might be underestimating right now, but it's definitely over 100 people, and we are sending, and assuming in that 100 people, just 50 send it to one person. That's more. And the PIRL network isn't the only network you're reaching out to. Even ICDR and so many other like organizations, groups, even like individual friends that we know. And it's not because they are particularly eligible, but it's just because we want to tap into like their network and the people that they know. So definitely, I think the survey is far reaching. So, and if we don't get enough people, we'll just keep trying, because that's like a very like key essential part of the study. Yes, the survey will give us some information, but then having that type of conversation with someone and actually, like going through their journey and understanding it just gives you another thing, it just gives you something else. Oh, now I could, actually, I think I saw a thumbs up. Oh, that was by Christian. Yeah. Okay. How's everyone doing today? Awkward silence. Hi, Etienne.
Hi, Leslie. Hi, everyone. I just want to really say thank you very much for this type of enthusiasm you've demonstrated towards research, because really, I, for one, is that which actually I'm looking for in young people, because with that research, which help us think critically and logically, we can advance a lot of things. And you must not have a lot of skills to start research. So the culture of research, we promote a research environment, really, where people know that, yes, you can gather data, analyze it, you make a good decision out of it. It will help us a lot, a lot. The more developed countries out there are developing more, because each and everything they try to analyze it, they want to look at ways of improving it, things, and it all depend on data collections and means of collecting things that can be analyzed easily and used at any time just to make improvement. And you must not do it in a very large scale. Research, you can start very small. Yes, you need funding to do research, but sometimes if your interest is really there, you can as well do a lot of things, even without funding, because that internal conviction about what you're doing and the purpose for which you're doing it will always keep you motivated. Just as you said for PhD, if you're not really motivated, and it's true that if you know some basic concepts, it reduces that, it makes things easier, not daunting in your mind, and it can keep you motivated. But apart from that, you also really want to make sure that what you're looking for, the questions you are asking is helpful to the society in one way or the other, or to a particular audience. So I really thank you for this presentation, and I thank you for actually your attitude. I wrote an article which basically condemned our educational system, especially with research at the undergraduate level with medical students, because we've made it really to look like we do research and we teach it just because we are making it a graduation requirement. You know, not because we want to teach people to reason logically and critically to bring solutions to our problem, but just because, you know, you must write a paper. And when you do it, at the end of the day, that is all. It's not that. Research is about helping you bring solutions and looking at things with a critical mind, with an open mind, but at least not just like a fool. At least when you do research, even in what area, you think logically, which is what we need many people to do, especially young people coming up. Thank you very much. And thank you, Lynn and the PIRL network as a whole for bringing us this far. Thank you.
Thank you, Etienne. Thank you so much for your comment. And I agree definitely with all of what you just said. Oh, let me check the comment again.
Yes, Lesley,
Sorry?
you have 2 new comments in the chat box.
Yeah, I'm just realizing that. When should we expect the final report or sharing of the results? Great question. If I think of like the timeline that we had set up at this point, we had like a set target of like August. So hopefully, you know, things will go as planned. We get the participants and actually the interview, but yeah, we did have like August, as a target. Are you also looking at the varied experience researchers who are present disability mode, depending on the type of disability and content? Experience researchers who are present disability might have depending on the type of disability. I'm not sure I understand I'm not sure I understand so the question here says, are you also looking at the varied experiences researchers who are persons with disabilities might have, depending on the type of disability, context, location? Oh, I understand. Yes, so definitely, like, because every disability has its own thing that it comes with. And I know part of the questions that we do ask is really to understand, like, you know, where they are, what they're currently doing, you know, how they got where they got. So we do want to know like those different experiences. We do want to know those experiences. And I think our questions do tap into that as well. So really, so we can get like a very like broad, like varied, all those varied perspective and experiences. It shows that we, a comment by Christian saying, that's a good point, Etienne. Thank you again, Etienne. Lesley's presentation shows us that research is actually very accessible. Well, I'm glad it does. Yeah. So it's definitely, there are, you know, certain aspects of research, you know, that makes it very accessible. And I think there's still room for, you know, for improvement, because there's just so much potential. So many people who, you know, could bring so much to the table, but aren't necessarily part of that. So yeah, it's definitely accessible to an extent, and there's still like, so we can make it better, basically. Can definitely make it better. So yeah, thank you all so much for being here. Thank you so much for the comments and the support. And if any of you like needs to follow up with me, with Lynn or any member of the team, you know, feel free to do that. I don't know if I gave my contact information to Sarah, but I want to assume I did. But if I didn't, I'll give it to Sarah, and then she can like share it in a follow-up email or something like that. But thank you for all those who are here, for your comments, your questions, you know, just sharing your thoughts. It's been a pleasure for me to be here today, and especially on International Women's Day. So that's quite exciting for me too. So
Yeah. Thank you for being here. Oh, Lynn said we are also getting greetings from colleagues in South Africa who will be looking at the recording. Yes, hello colleagues in South Africa. Thank you for listening in and watching the recording. No, but really thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to share my experience, because it's been a wonderful journey, like full of so much learning, and I do know that there's still like so much more learning to come, so I'm looking forward to that. So I don't know how the logistics of this happens, Sarah, but I'm here if there's any other questions or comments.
Yes, perfect. We hit the 1:30 mark, which means that the presentation is now done. But if anybody has any last-minute remarks or comments, please say something now, or else we will be closing the webinar. Does anybody have anything they'd like to say?